The girl lay motionless on a cold metal bench inside JFK Airport. Travelers rushed past her pulling suitcases, staring at their phones, never noticing the tiny figure in a faded pink jacket. But then a black car rolled up to the private entrance and the man who owned the airport himself walked in. Daniel Cross, a billionaire who never paused for anyone, stopped dead in his tracks when he saw her. Why would the most powerful man in New York freeze in front of a forgotten child? And why did he whisper almost under his breath? She looks just like her. If this moment shocks you, keep watching, because what happens next will change everything you thought you knew. And I want you to tell me if you were him, would you have walked away or stepped closer? Daniel Cross was not the kind of man who wasted time. His days were measured in board meetings, private flights, and deals worth billions. Yet, in that instant, the carefully built rhythm of his life collapsed. The little girl's hair was tangled, her lips pale, her hands clutched around a worn stuffed rabbit. Security had missed her. Travelers ignored her. But Daniel couldn't. Something inside him pulled his gaze and refused to let go. He ordered his assistant to call for help, but even as the words left his mouth, he was already moving toward the bench. What would you do if the child no one else noticed suddenly became the center of your world? As Daniel knelt beside her, he could hear the faintest breath, shallow and unsteady. She wasn't just sleeping, she was fighting to stay alive. Her small backpack lay open on the floor. Inside a half-eaten granola bar, a coloring book, and nothing else. No ID, no ticket, no sign of family. In an airport filled with thousands of people, this girl was completely alone. He reached out a hand, hesitant, the way a man who built empires suddenly finds himself terrified of breaking something fragile. Why did a billionaire surrounded by wealth, power, and privilege feel more powerless in front of one child than in front of a boardroom of rivals? The sound of the overhead intercom blurred into the distance as he gently shook her shoulder. Her eyes fluttered open just for a moment. They were startlingly clear, deep brown, staring straight at him as though she had been waiting. And then came the words that would burn into Daniel's memory forever. Barely above a whisper, she said, "Don't leave me, Papa." Then her eyes rolled shut again, and she slipped back into silence. For the first time in his life, Daniel Cross felt his chest tighten, not from stress or victory, but from something closer to fear and a strange, unshakable recognition. How could a stranger call him father? Was it confusion, or was it the truth he had spent years avoiding? The airport staff gathered around paramedics rushing in with their gear, but none of them could shake off the fact that the billionaire hadn't moved away. He stayed at her side, gripping the small stuffed rabbit she had dropped as though it were a lifeline. His assistant whispered that a meeting was waiting uptown. Daniel didn't answer. For once, money couldn't explain what was happening. He looked at the child again, her tiny chest rising unevenly, and something inside him broke through the armor he had built over decades. He made a decision, one that would cost him everything. Familiar, he would not leave this girl behind. And here's the question I want you to consider. Would you risk your name, your fortune, and your reputation for someone you didn't even know Daniel Cross was about to? And that choice would unravel secrets, ignite scandals, and lead to revelations that even he couldn't imagine. Keep watching, because the shocking truth behind this child's presence at JFK would turn a billionaire's life upside down. At the hospital, just beyond the chaos of JFK, Daniel Cross stood beside the sterile bed, where the girl now lay, her small body tethered to monitors that beeped in a steady rhythm. He had carried her through the terminal, refusing to hand her off, until doctors forced him to let go. Now he hovered in the corner of the pediatric wing, his tailored jacket draped over a chair, his eyes locked on her face. The billionaire who once measured every minute in dollars suddenly found himself counting her breaths instead. The lead physician entered quietly, clipboard in hand. "She's stable for now," he said, lowering his voice, "but she's malnourished. She's been under strain for quite some time." Then came the pause, the kind that carries weight before revelation. "We ran basic labs. Her blood type is AB negative, extremely rare. Less than 1% of the population has it." The doctor glanced at Daniel as if the fact should mean something to him. Daniel froze. His own blood type AB negative flashed through his memory like a red warning light. Coincidence, perhaps. But as the doctor spoke of its rarity, that word lodged itself into Daniel's chest. Rare? Too rare to ignore. What if a fact as simple as a blood test threatened to unravel the life you built? The girl stirred her fingers, twitching against the blanket. The nurse leaned over to adjust the IV, murmuring reassurances. Daniel stepped closer, unable to resist. He studied her face, searching for something familiar. A shape of the jaw, the way her lips pressed together, even in sleep, it all nagged at him like a half-remembered dream. For years, Daniel had buried the memory of Sophia Harper, a woman who once challenged him in ways no one else dared. Independent, stubborn, too proud to bend to his wealth. She had walked away from him 7 years earlier without a backward glance. He had told himself it was better that way. Yet here, lying in this hospital bed, was a living echo of what he had lost. What would you do if the past you buried came back not as a memory, but as a child with your blood? He stepped into the hallway to breathe, but the nurse followed him holding a small envelope. "We found this in her backpack," she said. Inside was a folded piece of paper, creased and smudged from travel. In shaky handwriting, the note read, "My name is Lily Harper. Please help me find someone. My mom is gone." The name sliced through Daniel like glass. Harper. Not a coincidence. His heart hammered as he pressed the paper tighter in his hand. Sophia Harper was gone. He hadn't heard of her death. No calls, no letters, just silence. And now this child Lily Harper claiming nothing but absence. Daniel called his attorney that night, his voice raw. "Find out what happened to Sophia Harper. Every record, every obituary. I don't care what it takes." Hours later, the call came back. A single car accident in Chicago 2 years ago. The woman in the report was Sophia. No surviving spouse listed, only a dependent child, Lily. The truth fell over him like a crushing wave. Sophia had raised a daughter without telling him. She had kept her life and their child hidden until fate forced the secret into the open. Imagine discovering in one night that the greatest love you lost had left behind the child you never knew you had. He returned to the hospital the next morning, sleepless, carrying coffee he never touched. Lily was awake now, propped up against pillows, her small hands gripping the stuffed rabbit he had picked up at the airport. She turned her head as he entered, her eyes wide but guarded. "You came back," she said softly, her voice still raspy. He nodded, lowering himself into the chair at her bedside. For a man who had once spoken in front of thousands with ease, Daniel suddenly couldn't find the right words for a 6-year-old. "Yes," he managed, "I'm here." She studied him for a long moment, then asked the question that tightened the air between them. "Do you know my mom?" He swallowed hard. "Yes, a long time ago." Lily nodded slowly as though she had suspected. She said once that people with money could fix things, but nobody fixed her. She got sick, then she was gone. Her words, delivered without tears, held a weight no child should carry. Daniel reached across the space and touched her small hand. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I didn't know." She didn't respond, but she didn't pull her hand away either. Later that day, a representative from Child Protective Services arrived, clipboard in hand, sharp-eyed. "Mr. Cross, we understand you found this child at JFK," she said. Until we verify her situation, she'll be placed under state care. The thought of Lily shuffled into a foster system alone again made Daniel's chest burn. He stepped forward, his voice steady. No, she stays here. With me. The caseworker raised an eyebrow. On what grounds Daniel pulled the doctor's note from his pocket, the one detailing her blood type? On grounds that require answers. And until those answers are found, she is not going anywhere. What happens when a man who has everything realizes the one thing he can't buy is trust? That night, Daniel sat by Lily's bed long after visiting hours. She drifted in and out of sleep, clutching her rabbit while he scrolled through photos on his phone, searching for old pictures of Sophia. There she was, laughing at a vineyard in Napa, eyes bright hair caught in the wind. And there, in the small face beside him, traces of the same light. It was undeniable now. He had spent years avoiding love, drowning in control and wealth, but fate had delivered proof of what he had missed. He wasn't just looking at a child in need, he was looking at his daughter. Daniel leaned back, closing his eyes for the first time since that airport bench. The world outside the hospital walls still saw him as untouchable, a man carved from steel and glass. But in here, sitting in the dim light of a pediatric ward, he was nothing more than a father, discovering the truth too late. And yet, as impossible as it felt, he wasn't too late for her. Not yet. Daniel Cross had always lived by rules he made himself. Control every variable, anticipate every failure, and never let emotions dictate decisions. But nothing in his meticulously ordered world prepared him for Lily Harper. For the first week after the hospital released her, he kept her close inside his Manhattan penthouse, a fortress of glass and steel perched above the noise of the city. He thought safety was enough, that money could shield her from uncertainty. But children don't live on safety alone, and Lily made that truth clear in ways he never expected. The first morning, he found her sitting at the breakfast table, staring at a plate of perfectly arranged fruit and eggs. She didn't touch it. "Is something wrong?" he asked, uneasy. She shook her head, then said softly, "Do you have cereal? The kind that makes the milk turn pink." It was such a small request, but it knocked the wind out of him. He had never thought about pink milk or the way small comforts built a child's world. That afternoon, he instructed his staff to stock the pantry with every cereal brand on the market. When Lily opened the cabinets the next morning, her eyes widened, and for the first time she laughed. It was a sound Daniel hadn't realized he needed to hear until it filled the room. But laughter didn't erase the shadows. Lily was cautious, always watching him as if weighing whether he might disappear like her mother. She never asked for toys, never demanded attention. She clung to her stuffed rabbit, its fur worn thin, as though it were the only anchor she trusted. One evening, Daniel noticed her standing in front of the wide windows that overlooked the skyline. She pressed her forehead to the glass and whispered, "Mama said we'd find someone kind." When he approached, she turned quickly, embarrassed she'd been overheard. He crouched down, trying to bridge the space between them. "Do you think I can be that person?" She hesitated, then shrugged. It wasn't rejection, it was fear wrapped in silence. Imagine trying to prove your worth to a child who doesn't know if love can last. Daniel decided structure might help, so he arranged tutors, child psychologists, even piano lessons, hoping to give her tools he thought she needed. But when Lily sat at the piano for the first time, her small hands hovering over the keys, she froze. "Too many people watching," she whispered. He had filled the room with experts, thinking resources equaled love. Instead, he had overwhelmed her. After everyone left, he sat beside her on the bench, awkwardly pressing a single key. "How about just us?" She giggled at his clumsy attempt, then struck 2 keys herself, the simplest duet in history. For a moment it was enough. Nights were harder. Lily often woke crying, though she tried to muffle the sound with her pillow. Daniel would enter quietly, sitting on the edge of her bed until she calmed. Once, in the dark, she whispered, "If you're my dad, why weren't you there before?" The question sliced deeper than any boardroom betrayal ever had. He answered honestly, voice thick with regret. "Because I didn't know. But now that I do, I'm not going anywhere." She didn't respond, but she reached out and let her hand rest against his. For Daniel, it felt like the start of forgiveness, fragile but real. How do you rebuild trust in someone who has every reason to doubt you? As the days passed, Daniel realized love wasn't grand gestures. It was the little rituals. Saturday mornings turned into pancake experiments with Lily, insisting chocolate chips were non-negotiable. Sunday afternoons were spent in Central Park, where she ran across the grass with her rabbit tucked under one arm, free, in a way Daniel had never allowed himself to be. Each laugh, each shared meal, stitched him closer to her. But shadows lingered. Child Protective Services continued their evaluations, sending caseworkers unannounced to inspect his home. One, a stern woman named Miss Reynolds, watched Lily color at the kitchen table and then turned to Daniel. "She's adjusting, but she's still testing boundaries. You'll need to be patient." Patience was not Daniel's strength. But for Lily, he learned. Resistance came not only from Lily, but from Daniel's own world. His board members whispered about distractions, about the danger of headlines linking him to a child he hadn't known existed. An article in a tabloid called Lily, the mystery heir of Cross Enterprises, painting her as a scandal rather than a child in need of safety. Daniel slammed the paper down in front of his executives. "She is not a headline," he snapped. "She's my daughter." But the truth was he was fighting on two fronts. One for her heart, the other for her future. One evening, after a particularly grueling day, he came home to find Lily in the library, sitting cross-legged on the floor, with books scattered around her. She looked up, holding a photo album one of his staff had pulled from storage. "Is this you?" she asked, pointing at a picture of Daniel as a boy, his arm around his mother. He nodded. "That's me and your grandmother." Lily studied the photo carefully. "You looked happy." He sat beside her, taking the album into his hands. "I was. She was strong. She never let me give up on myself." Lily tilted her head. "Do you think she'd like me?" The question hit him with the force of memory. "She would love you," he said without hesitation. Lily smiled shyly, then leaned against his arm. In that moment, the distance between them shrank again. Sometimes the hardest battles aren't with the world, they're with the silence between two people who desperately need each other. Daniel knew healing took time, but he also knew Lily deserved more than survival. She deserved roots. So he cleared 2 weeks from his schedule and devoted himself entirely to her. They baked, they played board games, they walked through museums where Lily insisted on reading every plaque aloud. He saw the way her eyes lit up at airplanes, the way she lingered by the model of the Wright brothers' flyer. "Do you like planes?" he asked. She nodded. "Mama said we'd fly one day. She said the sky was big enough for us both." Daniel's throat tightened. "The sky is big enough for us. Now," he whispered. Yet trust remained fragile. One afternoon, when Daniel left briefly for a board meeting, Lily panicked. Helen, the housekeeper, found her hiding in the closet, clutching her rabbit, convinced he wouldn't return. When Daniel came back and discovered what had happened, he knelt in front of her. "I will always come back." He promised, his voice steady but breaking. "Always." Slowly, she emerged from the closet, her eyes searching his. "Even if I mess up," she asked. Especially then, he replied. It was the first time she allowed herself to believe him. The struggle wasn't about wealth or power. It wasn't about corporate image or reputation. It was about two people, one small and afraid the other, powerful yet broken in his own way, trying to build something real from fragments of trust and memory. Daniel had never fought harder for anything in his life, and every step forward with Lily reminded him love wasn't earned in the boardroom. It was built in kitchens over pink milk and parks, where laughter echoed in whispered promises made in the dark. It was messy, imperfect, and terrifying. But for Daniel Cross, it was also the only fight that truly mattered. The storm broke the night Daniel Cross decided the truth could no longer stay hidden. Rain hammered against the tall glass walls of his penthouse, lightning cutting jagged lines across the sky. Lily slept upstairs, curled beside her rabbit, unaware of the war building outside her door. For weeks, Daniel had fought in silence against board members who wanted to bury the past, against the press eager to turn a child into a scandal, against his own fear of what the truth would cost. But silence had stolen enough from his life. Silence had stolen Marissa. He wasn't going to let it steal Lily too. The evidence had come together like shards of glass, sharp and undeniable. Old record surveillance footage, payments buried in offshore accounts, proof that powerful men inside his own company had tried to erase Marissa and the child she carried. They had called it a liability, a distraction. They had lied to protect the brand, and in doing so they had nearly destroyed the only thing that mattered. Daniel stared at the documents spread across his desk. Every page was an indictment not only of those who betrayed him, but of himself for trusting them. He had built an empire, but in the shadows of that empire, cruelty and cowardice had thrived. He couldn't undo what Marissa suffered, but he could refuse to let her be forgotten. The following morning, Daniel walked into the boardroom not as a CEO, but as a father prepared to fight. The room fell silent when he entered. Miles Garvey, a founding member of the company, and once a mentor, leaned back in his chair with the kind of calm that reeked of arrogance. Daniel placed a flash drive on the table and pressed a button. The screen behind him flickered to life, showing Marissa at an airport terminal clutching Lily's small hand as a man in a dark suit cornered her. "You all know what this is," Daniel said, his voice low but steady. This is the moment a woman tried to protect her child and was silenced. Gasps rippled through the room. Some board members looked away. Others leaned forward, their faces pale. Garvey smirked. "And what do you expect us to do with this?" sympathized Daniel, locked eyes with him. "No, I expect you to resign. Effective immediately." Murmurs filled the room. Garvey laughed, cold and dismissive. "You think a child no one knew about makes you a saint. You're still the man who let her slip through your fingers." Daniel's jaw tightened. "You're wrong. I'm the man who found her again, and I won't let anyone, especially you, take her away from me." He turned to the rest of the board. "This company will not be built on secrets. Not anymore. I'm calling for a vote. Remove Miles Garvey from his position permanently." For a tense moment, silence held the room. Then hands began to rise one after another until the majority was undeniable. Garvey's smirk faltered. He stood slowly, his chair scraping the floor. "You'll regret this," he spat. Daniel didn't blink. "Not as much as I regret trusting you." Sometimes transformation doesn't come with applause. It comes with the sound of doors closing behind the people who once held power over you. That night, Daniel didn't celebrate. He sat on the floor of Lily's room, watching her breathe in the soft glow of her nightlight. She stirred, eyes fluttering open. "Daddy?" she whispered. He reached for her hand. "Yes, sweetheart." "Are you going to leave again?" The words cut deeper than Garvey's betrayal ever could. He shook his head firmly. "No, not now, not ever." She studied his face for a long moment, then whispered, "Mama said the truth is like a lantern. Even if it's small, it makes the dark less scary. He swallowed hard. She was right. And I promise you I'll never let the dark win again. Lily nestled back into her pillow, clutching her rabbit, as Daniel sat there long after she fell asleep. The next day, the press conference was set. His advisors begged him to reconsider. Stock prices might tumble, competitors might strike. But Daniel stood behind the podium with a calm that came from somewhere deeper than business. Cameras clicked, reporters leaned forward. He didn't read from a script. 7 years ago, a woman named Marissa Harper tried to reach me. She never made it. She died believing her voice didn't matter, but it did. It does. Because she left behind a daughter. My daughter. The room erupted in murmurs, but Daniel pressed on. People in my own company tried to bury her truth. They called it a liability. I call it love. And I will not allow her story or my daughter's life to be silenced again. Reporters fired questions about stockholder confidence, about corporate liability, about scandal. Daniel answered each with the same unwavering resolve. I'd rather lose fortune than lose faith. I'd rather face scandal than deny my child. And I'd rather fight for truth than live with lies. By the time he left the stage, he wasn't just a CEO anymore. He was a father who had chosen his legacy not in steel and glass, but in love and honesty. Sometimes the fight that transforms you isn't the one you win in public, it's the one you choose in private. Back at the estate that evening, Helen brought Lily into the kitchen just as Daniel returned. She ran to him, her curls bouncing, her stuffed rabbit dangling from her hand. I saw you on TV, she said breathlessly. You told them about me. He lifted her up, holding her close. I did. I wanted the world to know what I know, that you're the best part of me. Lily studied him carefully. Did they believe you? He smiled. They didn't have a choice. She rested her head on his shoulder. Then Mama can rest too. Daniel closed his eyes, the weight of her words anchoring him. For the first time, he felt not like a man fighting to protect, but a man transformed by the very thing he had once tried to avoid. Love. That night, he opened Marissa's journal again. On one of the last pages, she had written, "If he finds her, he'll find himself." Daniel traced the letters with his finger, realizing the truth he had spent years running from. The man who built towers and airlines had been hollow. The man who held Lily in his arms was whole. And transformation didn't come with profits. It came with a child whispering "Daddy" in the dark, trusting him not to leave. As the storm outside faded to a gentle rain, Daniel stepped into Lily's room one more time. She was asleep, her hand curled around her rabbit. He whispered softly, almost a prayer, "I found you, and I'm never letting you go." The words weren't for her alone. They were for Marissa, for the boy he used to be, and for the man he had finally become. The truth had cost him, but it had given him everything. And for the first time in his life, Daniel Cross understood what transformation truly meant. The courtroom was silent when the judge lowered her gavel and spoke the words that would settle everything, full guardianship granted to Mr. Daniel Cross. For weeks, Daniel had stood against the system, against whispers of scandal, and against the doubts that he could be more than just a man defined by money. Now, with Lily's small hand clasped in his, he finally felt a weight lift. She leaned against him, her face breaking into a shy smile, and whispered, "Does this mean I get to stay?" He bent down, kissed her hair, and said, "It means you're home, sweetheart. For good." That was the moment he realized he hadn't just won custody. He had won a life worth living. In the weeks that followed, the skyscrapers of Manhattan seemed a little less imposing. The silence of Daniel's penthouse was replaced with the sound of Lily's laughter echoing through the halls, the pitter-patter of her running feet, the music of a life finally shared. On her 7th birthday, He surprised her with something neither boardrooms nor business rivals could ever replace: a celebration of family. They boarded a ferry that carried them past the Statue of Liberty, its torch glowing golden in the fading light. Balloons drifted in the breeze, and a small cake with pink frosting sat on the table. As the city skyline shimmered behind them, Lily blew out her candles, whispering a wish she wouldn't share. Daniel didn't need to know. The sight of her glowing face was enough. Hope came not only in birthdays and laughter, but in healing. Daniel transformed one wing of his company's headquarters into the Harper Foundation, a charity named in honor of Sophia Harper. Its mission was clear: to give children like Lily, those caught in the cracks of a system that overlooked them, a chance at safety and belonging. Reporters who once doubted him now quoted his words. "We can measure success in numbers and profits," he told them, "but the truest measure of a life is who we choose to fight for." For a man once consumed by markets and deals, it was more than a press statement. It was his new creed. At home, Lily grew into the rhythm of her new world. She enrolled in school, her rabbit tucked safely in her backpack each morning. Daniel attended her first parent-teacher conference nervous, in a way business had never made him. When the teacher praised Lily's creativity and resilience, he fought to hold back tears. One evening, she brought home an art project, a crayon drawing of 3 figures under a bright sun. "That's me, that's you, and that's Mama," she explained. "She's in the sky, but she's still with us." Daniel framed it on his office wall, placing it where his awards and plaques once hung. Every time he looked at it, he was reminded of the family he nearly lost and the future he was determined to build. Legacy no longer meant fortune. It meant moments. The bedtime stories where Lily begged for just one more page. The afternoons at Central Park where she fed the ducks and insisted on naming each one. The mornings she asked him to braid her hair, laughing when his clumsy fingers tangled the strands. These small rituals became the architecture of his days, more permanent than glass towers or corporate empires. And as the months passed, Daniel noticed something remarkable. He was no longer leading Lily into life, she was leading him. Still, grief had its place. On a spring afternoon, Daniel and Lily visited a small garden he had commissioned in Sophia's memory. A marble plaque bore her name, surrounded by blooming dogwoods and roses. Lily placed her rabbit beside the flowers for a moment, whispering, "Mama, I'm okay now." Daniel stood behind her, hands on her shoulders, feeling both the ache of loss and the grace of renewal. "She'd be proud of you," he said softly. Lily turned her eyes shining. "She'd be proud of you too, Daddy." For Daniel, those words carried more value than any fortune ever could. He began to write again, something he hadn't done since his youth. Late at night, when the city hummed outside his window, he filled a leather-bound journal with letters to Sophia. He told her about Lily's stubborn streak, her fascination with airplanes, her new friends at school. He wrote about his fears that he might fail, that he might not always know the right answers, but also about the promise that anchored him he would never leave. In those pages he found not only confession, but also redemption. He wasn't just documenting their days. He was preserving a testament of love, one he hoped Lily would one day read. As seasons turned, the man once known only for power and wealth was spoken of differently. Not as the billionaire who owned airports, but as the father who chose truth over silence. His story spread not because of scandal, but because of what it revealed: that even those who seem untouchable can be transformed by love, that it's never too late to claim what truly matters. And for audiences who once doubted his humanity, the sight of Daniel holding Lily's hand became proof that redemption is not theory, it's practice. One evening, as they sat on the balcony overlooking the city, Lily leaned against him and asked, "Do you think Mama can see us?" Daniel looked at the stars, his arm wrapped around her. "I think she sees everything, and I think she's smiling." Lily nodded satisfied and rested her head on his chest. In the quiet, Daniel realized legacy was not a building, not a balance sheet, not even a name carved in stone. It was a child's trust, a promise kept a life rebuilt from ashes into light. So when people asked Daniel what he had gained, he didn't speak of profits or projects. He answered simply, "I found my daughter, and in finding her, I found myself." And that truth carried forward in Lily's laughter, and Sophia's memory became the legacy he would leave behind, not one measured in wealth, but in hope. And here's the challenge for anyone hearing this story. If you believe that love and truth matter more than silence and power, don't just watch, share it. Somewhere out there, another Lily is waiting for someone to show up, and your voice might be the one that lights their way. From the very first moment at JFK Airport, when Daniel Cross stopped in front of a fragile girl lying motionless on a cold bench, the story shifted from a tale of fortune and power to one of humanity and love. He had been known to the world as a billionaire, a man of control, calculation, and success. But that night, fate stripped away the armor of wealth and exposed the one role he could not buy, fatherhood. What began as shock and confusion unfolded into a journey of discovery, struggle, confrontation, and finally redemption. Daniel uncovered truths he had never expected to face, the rare blood type that tied him to Lily Harper, the painful revelation of Sophia's life and tragic death, and the betrayal of his own corporate circle that had buried what should never have been hidden. Each revelation forced him to choose between preserving an image or embracing responsibility. And every time he chose the harder path, the path of truth. The struggle was not just legal battles or boardroom wars. The real test was learning how to earn Lily's trust to prove that he would stay when everyone else had left. From quiet moments at the breakfast table to nights spent reassuring her that she would never be abandoned again, Daniel grew into a role he once believed he was incapable of filling. Lily, cautious and wounded, slowly opened her heart to him. Together, they rebuilt what life had tried to take from them, a sense of belonging, a family. The showdown tested Daniel in the most public way possible. He risked reputation, wealth, and influence to stand before the world and declare his daughter's place in his life. He exposed corruption within his own empire, tearing down the walls of silence that had protected the powerful at the expense of the vulnerable. By doing so, he transformed from a man defined by fortune into a man defined by courage. And finally, resolution came, not as a triumph shouted from skyscrapers, but as laughter echoing through his home, a birthday celebrated on the open water, and the creation of the Harper Foundation to give hope to children like Lily. His legacy became not about steel and stock, but about trust, memory, and love. The lesson from Daniel's story reaches beyond him. It reminds us that no matter how high we climb, no matter how much we own, the measure of our lives rests in the relationships we build and the truths we are brave enough to defend. For anyone listening, ask yourself, are you showing up for the people who matter most? Are you protecting what truly lasts? In a world obsessed with status and distraction, choosing to be present, choosing to love is the boldest act we can make. If this story inspired you, don't let it stop here. Share it with someone who needs hope. Leave a comment with your thoughts and subscribe to this channel. Your support gives us the strength to continue bringing stories that move, uplift, and remind us of what really matters. Together, we can keep creating moments that touch hearts and change lives.